and welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake Lamore, and on this episode, I'm actually stepping away from the mic and letting Mr. Kankakee himself, Bill Yonka, take over as your guest host. And we find ourselves, or I should say Bill finds himself on location at the Kankakee County Speedway, talking with Jim Whittington and also Billy Knippenberg.
This is a pretty cool honor to be asked to be the guest host of the Kankakee podcast. Thanks to Jake for having me do that. And it's a really neat thing to be able to put the spotlight on something that I'm really passionate about. And I think the Kankakee podcast does a great job of putting that spotlight on a whole bunch of things around our community and people who are doing neat stuff and some great history. And, when it comes to history, this is the kind of history I care about most, the history of racing here in Kankakee County. And I didn't think of anybody better to talk to than Jim Whittington. Thanks for taking a little time with us, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, Billy.
This is, how did you get introduced to auto racing here at the fairgrounds?
At the fairgrounds, well, my father was always involved.
Yeah.
In the mid-'50s, he lived next door to Joe Weaver and here in the rah-rah, the race cars. My dad was in the garage helping. Before I know it, I'm sitting in the grandstands. And I actually have some memories when I was 5 and 6 years old of the half-mile track and seeing the coops dragging along the fence of the wall. But that's how I got started, watching. And then Wayne Etzel was promoting in the 70s, and I'd come out and help him paint the fence. Well, actually, going back earlier than that, when my dad and Earl Hubert and O'Connor and them guys got together to bring the fair racing back here, They got steel from the old hardware store next to A.L. Smith's and put up the metal wall all the way around here. And I was 15 years old that summer, helping my dad and the crew out here putting up the wall. They actually put this particular shape out here because prior to that, it was a half-mile track.
So the front stretch would go along the grandstands like it is today, but then it would go out further in what direction? This was the front straightaway, and it went basically back to that tree line, and it actually went about to that fence line of the pit area back that way. So it was one big racetrack back then. Yeah, well, that's a different style of it.
Yeah.
And I think of people who haven't been out here before, what made racing in those early days interesting? What drew crowds out here?
Well, I think it was basically the early days of stock car racing was crash, bang, boom.
Yeah.
And the cars would stop on the track. They didn't care if they were still there. They still raced. People just loved that type of action.
Yeah.
And I think that's basically because it was a little bit of form of demolition plus stock car racing. And that's initially brought them out here. You know, I mean, the excitement, the thrill, and there was nothing else to do. Let's go racing, right?
Yeah. It was always Friday night.
Always Friday night here at Kankakee, aside from some specials from time to time. Always Friday night.
In those early days, this track started in late 40s, correct? 1949.
This location here was 49. That's right. But racing in the Kankakee area actually goes all the way back to 1908, when the fairgrounds ran an article in the paper here advertising for the area's first automobile race. Now, there's very few areas that can claim that. But the history of racing in Kankakee does go back to 1908 at 4 different fairgrounds.
Okay.
And multiple other speedways in the area. Watseka had McCullough Speedway. There was Tommy O'Neill Speedway where the old Drive-In 54 theater used to sit, which was right next to Old Fair Park, which Old Fair Park was the second fairgrounds that had the races. And Beckman Park, downtown Kankakee at one time, which was called Electric Park.
Because it had the
there was a fairgrounds there at one time. That's
really?
Correct. That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was a very dangerous sport back then.
Back then, absolutely. Well, back then they actually had specific cars designed to race. It was called the big cars.
Yeah.
Indy style cars.
Okay.
Kankakee was actually getting the same drivers that were running the Indy 500 back in the 10s and 20s, racing here at what they called the Interstate Fair.
And they would race on a dirt track here.
A dirt track.
And then they would go and race in the Indy 500.
Most tracks they were racing at were dirt tracks.
Okay. So it was the abnormal one to go race on.
And the early years of Indy was dirt. Then it was brick.
Okay.
All dirt.
All dirt.
All dirt.
Yeah. It's still a pretty good, I still think, being biased, it's still a fun and exciting surface to watch racing on.
Absolutely. It helps me born into it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different sport to try to attract new fans. It takes a real effort, and Billy's doing an outstanding job promoting and trying to do just that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough times.
Yeah. There's a lot of options out there for people to go and do.
Absolutely.
What was it about it that made you say, okay, I want to do this. I'm young Jim Whittington. Someday I want to be part of this scene and eventually become a flagman.
It just happened.
Yeah.
I was out here giving Wayne help from time to time in the late 70s. And then one day he must have got frustrated with something. And I was having lunch with him on a Sunday afternoon. And he said, why don't you come out here and assist Raleigh in the flag stand? 1980. Okay. Sure. I got up there and, well, here I am today, still up there.
From 1980, the first time. Yeah. Now, what was that like the first time up at a flag stand?
Well, it was a little bit, actually, I felt pretty comfortable. To be honest with you. Yeah. I think what was funny about it was I was always an assistant. Then it was in October. Raleigh didn't show up. Wayne knew it ahead of time. It was a 100 lapper afternoon race. It's yours. That's what he said to me. So it's the first one.
And it's a big event. Yeah. And I imagine an afternoon race in that year, it's a big and dusty event.
Well, not really. I was talking to Billy about that earlier, about how an afternoon race, there's ways you can keep the dust down. Mm-hmm. But you got to remember the cars back in those days, they didn't have all the spoilers and all that vacuum type design that would suck and make all that dust. Okay. So it was, yeah.
So what getting up on the flag stand, the first time's doing it, looking out at the racetrack, and you got, bigger races with 20, 22 drivers out there on a small track. How did you figure out, where do I watch? What do I keep my eye on? There's so much going on out here.
I don't know. It just seemed to come natural. I seem to be able to scan all the time with good help in the corners.
Yeah.
And but there was a time where it was all left up to the starter. You were supposed to watch everything. This is before they had headsets. Yeah. They hand you notes, and you'd run down the track, have to reline up the cars.
Yeah. The technology has improved so much as far as the communication with the drivers. I don't think people realize that even a place like a track like Kankakee has communication from the tower to each of the drivers in their ear, letting them know where they have to be on the racetrack. And you can hear that information as well.
I can hear that information as well.
So it's you can actually talk to them as opposed to days long ago. You just have to point at them with a flag.
Right. And believe me, they would pay attention, or else the flagman would be down on the track.
Look at the flagman would come down the track and actually hit the flag on their car.
Or they'd try running you over.
And now that they have the technology where you're telling drivers in their ear where they have to line up on the track, I very rarely see guys like you in a move that looks strange to the rest of the world, but you point your butt at the car and you point at the driver, and then you smack your own rear, letting that driver know you're at the back.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
But that's like, it sounds strange when to the regular world when you say it, but it was growing up a totally natural thing in the world of racing that you point at a car, smack your butt. Yeah. That they know they're at the tail.
That's what you got to do.
That's right. You ever drop a flag?
Oh, yeah. Well, funny you should say that. I don't think I've ever dropped one here, but at the other track I worked at, I actually dropped it 3 times this year. But it was more because I was coming up with these lighter sticks and silky flags, and the wind. And we were having a lot of winds early this year. I think you know that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that the winds were terrible this year, and actually they're pulling them right out of my freaking head.
Wow.
Kind of embarrassing, but it happens.
So
could be by getting a little arthritis too from 70s.
Well, and how old are you now?
Well, I'm old. 72.
72.
I just had a birthday this last Sunday or last Saturday.
And still doing it and still enjoying it.
Well, sometimes I think this is what's keeping me going.
Yeah.
Just I get out there and I'm working my arms and doing all this stuff, and that rush, that adrenaline, that blood pumping, I think it's good for them, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and I don't think people realize, like, with the way the cars are now and the power they have, and with a full field of cars rolling right underneath you, you're physically above them sometimes. That's quite a feeling.
Well, I've got a left arm that shows 40 years. I mean, you see all these little nicks in that. Of course, you don't see them on my right arm, but when you're hanging out this way, I mean, I'm all nicked up on this side. I've got,
it's just stuff you
get a few stuff, I hit a rock out here Friday night, but
the wind that hits you too.
Yeah.
I find it, the times I've stood up there with you, I feel like, oh my goodness, how do you keep your wits about you when you've got this wind blowing? You've got cars every which direction.
I mean, I kind of lost sight of that, but you're right. I mean, after so many years, you just get used to that balance and dealing with the wind. But, then you got to, one thing I try is I always try to keep one eye for me all times. I got to keep looking to my left all the time.
Yeah.
Because you never know when a tire's going to come flying at you or a car's going to hit the cage or whatever's going to go on. So you got to be ready to skedaddle out of that flag stand when you have to.
And you've had to skedaddle.
I've had to skedaddle before, yeah.
You've had cars come up that high.
Not so much here, but down south I have.
Yeah.
But the World of Outlaws sprints and different people go tumbling through the air and hit the cage. And, there's a pretty popular video online right now on a sportsman race down there about 3 years ago where a guy did come up in the stand with me, but it shows me running the hell out of the way real fast. But,
So when did you realize that you want to be part of the scene here? You're helping out. Did you realize, okay, did you want to race?
Well, in 1969, I was half partners with Butch Kistner before when he first started. So I was kind of working with the race car a little bit. And one thing led to another. I think I was playing music too much, so I couldn't really do that.
Yeah.
And then I started helping Mark Huber a little bit. And that's when Wayne got a hold of me one time. He says, you just need to get up there. So I got up there, been up ever since. 2 years later, Fairbury asked me to go down south. So I did that. So,
yeah. And never really thought about anything else and didn't want to be part of it any other way?
Well, I dabbled in a few different things. I think you remember over at another Indiana track where I was going to, maybe announce a little bit. I think you came out. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another. And I think I did a little bit down here too.
Mm-hmm.
And but I like the flag stand.
Yeah.
I like it's the rush. It's that adrenaline. People used to ask me, and I drive all the way to Kokomo on Sunday night, how do you get home after all that? As guys, when you've been flagging all night long, you've got an adrenaline rush that takes you at least 2 hours to come down from. And I'm sure the racers will tell you the same thing.
You can't just turn it off.
No, you just can't turn it off.
Was there, in all that time, there's probably nobody in the history of this racing in Kankakee who's physically with their eyes seen more races than you.
I've seen a few.
Well, just because I'm thinking about even the people who are here who've raced all that time, a lot of times they're back in the pits, they're working on stuff. You're actually physically seeing all those races.
I'm officiating. I'm not necessarily watching races that much, but I got to be honest. There are times that if you get like somebody that's either never won or hasn't won in 15 years, they're out front, it's hard to take your eye off of that.
Really?
No question about it.
And do you still, while you're looking for different things on the track, do you notice, wow, that guy or girl is really putting on a show? They're really driving very well.
I can see people progress. And when I see somebody progress, I always try to make a point to let them know that. Because it means a lot to them. And I don't do it for that reason. Well, I guess I do it for that reason because they need to know, hey, I recognize you're doing it. You're getting there,
When it means something coming from you.
And I suppose it does, but, so I make a point to try to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just need to put a face to the name because sometimes
you're seeing all the cars as the car, not physically the driver all the time. Now, have there been people over the years that you say, you're not supposed to ever have any favorites? But you have people you really respected the way they did things out on the track.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
No, you can't be cheering from the flag stand. But there's got to be people over the years that you see them out there and say, you know what? They handle themselves really well, or they drive in an exciting way, but they do it in a way I can respect.
Yes. There is a soft spot
Yeah.
And I guess most recent example, and I hate this, is if you see an old time driver that, won tons of features and all of a sudden he has one great night and he hasn't had one in 3 or 4 years, you can't help but notice.
Yeah.
You're almost cheering for him on the flight, but you got to hold that line. You're still, impartial.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can't help it. You're human.
Yeah. So you've had those.
Well, we had Amber Croucher win her first feature, and she's been. I don't know how. Last year she must have had half a dozen seconds. It seemed that way, and then all of a sudden she gets a win.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing.
It's a very big thing. I don't think people realize after you participate in like high school sports or something like that, there's nothing really that compares to winning a feature.
One feature race is such a big thing.
And I feel lucky because I get to be on the track talking to the people as they get out of their cars and seeing their faces and seeing the people who are running down there to be with them in this moment. It's a big life thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, you're second, maybe third generation?
Second.
Yeah.
My grandfather didn't care for it. Right. So my dad came out with his uncle.
Your dad was a major fan.
Oh, yeah.
Major fan.
Yeah, big fan.
Loved Kankakee Speedway.
Yeah.
As many of us do.
Yeah. No.
And I can't say enough for what Billy's done out here.
Mm-hmm.
He's a true promoter. He's a perfectionist, as am I. And, but that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hang their hat on something they can't be proud of.
Yeah.
I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of what Billy does.
And, the things like painting Kankakee Speedway on the wall and touching it up and making it look.
He knows what it
like
takes.
you can. I take pride every time I come out here and look at it. I think,
absolutely.
Man, that's me. I'm part of that.
I hear his pride on my headsets, too. If something ain't right, he'd damn well let us know. But he should let us know.
Yeah. What are the memories that, you think back on over the years and think, man, those were some really good days? Are there different eras that you remember? You think, man, there was some times when the competition was really good. It was fun. What made it fun for you?
I don't know, just the whole family, the whole atmosphere, the way everybody knows and loves each other. And loving each other enough to want to fight each other at the end of the night. That's how much love is out here, And I think my fondest moments, honestly, I was telling Billy about this earlier, was back in the 70s and through the 80s, we used to always come back in October for a afternoon Sunday race.
Yeah.
That was always such a great time. It just fell off. And I can never understand to this day, why can't we?
Yeah.
I just pray and wish for a marquee event to take hold here at Kankakee Speedway someday. Because I just think that's what it needs.
Yeah.
But it's a tough decision. It's a hard thing to put together with all these traveling series that are out there today. Back in those days, there was no UMP or dirt car or Lucas Oil. It was basically Kankakee would have to check up north, see what Santa Fe rules were, and maybe down south and see what theirs were, and try to find someplace in between, because Kankakee was always the stepchild, so to speak. You had all these ruling tracks up north, and you had these tracks down. You had the hot rods down south. You had the more or less contained rules to the north. And we were always in that spot trying to. I remember Wayne struggling many times with, how do I keep the Bob Pierces, Paul Schaefer's, and bring the Izzels and the O'Connors and Knippenbergs from up north and blend them together?
Because they had different rules.
They were different rules. There were more hot rods down south and more rule contained up north.
Interesting.
So it was a tough draw right here at Kankakee on a Friday night.
When they're competing against each other, you want to create a level playing field, but you really couldn't in that era.
It was tough. Tough. You end up having to say goodbye to one or the other. Well, that's what created a lot of the strikes here, and the driver unhappiness was the fact that a promoter was allowing the hot rods to come up and compete with the more of the basic stock cars. And then Piatone had a track running on Friday nights back in those days. And there was a lot of cars in those days. We were saying 30, 40 cars come here, and then it'd be 30, 40 cars in the Lake Mountain. Oh, only one division back then.
Yeah.
At Piatone. So it was a tough draw.
Is there anything that stands out to you as like one of those nights when, just trying to illustrate how kind of wild it gets every once in a while? Any nights that you just remember, wow. Because a lot of them, they all blend together for me. There was so many exciting things. Like I think about this last week, we had somebody win a race by 1/1000th of a second.
Just what I was going to say.
Oh, really?
I'm trying to remember who that was now. But
Jamie Lomax.
0.001. I'm looking at the line, and honestly, nobody asked me. If anybody would have asked me who won, I would have said a dead heat. It really looked to me like it was a dead heat. But knowing the transponder system, it had I don't even know if a transponder could come up dead even or not.
I don't know. Well, and now, years ago, somebody up in this booth would have had to make that call.
Oh my God.
Couldn't have imagined
Believe
that.
me, there would have been yelling, screaming, no matter which way it would have went.
and that it's kind of nice that some of that judgment's taken out of it now, isn't it?
Yes. Now, I don't know if it happened or not. Billy's down there, of course, but early on in the transponder era, if we had a race that was that close, they would immediately go down there and check the transponder locations on the cars.
Oh.
Because we had an incident, I can't remember where it was at, a couple of years ago, where another driver looked at the video, and the other driver had actually won.
Oh.
But the transponder had the other guy win. But it was actually on film. So until they got that part squared away, I think Billy just now walked back in. He knows that transponder location has got to be right there, you know, because you could steal a win that way.
You know, getting back to what you were saying about kind of the love and appreciation for each other, you know, things do get heated. And we both have seen those things. But what I think is kind of cool about the scene is that, you know, if I saw somebody, I don't know, if I was traveling somewhere and I saw a dirt track racing T-shirt, you know, it wouldn't matter if I was a fan of that guy or that guy was like an arch enemy. You'd be like, oh, we got this special. I know I know that person. I see them.
Yeah.
And just kind of this bond that we all have and kind of a language we can all speak.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, absolutely. I'd be on the other side of the country at times and I'll see a race shirt, you know. I remember one time seeing a homeless person walking down Court Street in Kankakee one time. I knew he had to be homeless because you could just tell you know, he had a McKay Winger T-shirt on. And where the hell does this guy come up with that? They spot up everywhere.
Yeah. But it is an interesting world. And, you know, I'm always trying to bring new people out here. I know Billy's always pushing that. Are there people who are in your life who, you know you do this goofy stuff, but have never been out here to see you?
There's few. They usually all make it out at least once.
Yeah.
You know, what the heck? You know, but I appreciate it, though. They
Isn't
can
that
see
nice?
it. They can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got to be born into it to a certain degree. It's in the blood. You know? As long as I can still climb and still have my wits and my arthritis don't start getting like I can't hold on to a flag stick anymore, you're going to see me around for a few more years.
Very good. Well, this has been a lot
How
of fun.
about you, Billy?
What about me?
Well, when did you start announcing?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I must have been in college, and I would come home for races, and Connors took the track over, and then they had a announcer who was here and then not here, and quit in the middle of the night, some stuff like that.
Right.
I remember all the details, but then I was like, wow, I'm a little too old just to be here hanging out with my dad.
Right.
I gotta find a job to do, and that was the thing I wanted to do. So I figured out and you gave me tips as I first got started. You know, you heard things and kind of
voice of Kankakee. I think I labeled you one time.
Yeah, but you kind of helped guide me in different directions.
Now you have the charisma, you got the smile, you've got the positive nature about yourself.
Thanks.
And boy, this racing scene could use as many Billy Yonkas and that we can come muster up.
Yeah.
Because it's a great, great sport.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wish more people would come out and give us a shot. Just one time.
Yeah.
Maybe twice. Might take 3 times getting your blood, but I just about guarantee if you do that many times.
And once you've been out here 4 times, it's like watching a soap opera. You start knowing the characters, and then you start, and then you like, oh, I remember last week when these 2 cars were together.
You're right. That's a big thing. You gotta get to know a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that's changed over the years too. Is that a lot of the racers used to be from closer, right?
Well,
or it was more predictable.
You would think, but even you go back to you'd have to go pretty far back to buy that, because even through the 70s, what do you have? Maybe O'Connor, and that would be about the only local running late model.
Yeah, true. But I just feel like in my time being around, the number of cars that are coming from Indiana now is much more based on tracks closing some places.
That's a lot to do with it. Yeah, that's a shame. That's a shame. Yeah.
I know we both worked at Crown Point, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And we hated to see that go. That was a fun place to race.
Went, yeah. Mm-hmm. Been a great ride. Thanks, Billy.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, sir.
I hope you're enjoying this episode about the Kankakee County Speedway with your guest host, Bill Yonka. Now, in 2021, the future of the Speedway was looking very bleak. That is until Billy Knippenberg came along and decided to help keep the dirt flying. Let's take a listen.
Oh, it's such a cool honor to be the guest host for this Kankakee podcast. I'm Bill Yonka, and getting to discuss one of my favorite things, the racing at the Kankakee County Speedway, and Billy Knippenberg hanging out with us for a little while to talk about growing up in racing and now taking racing here into the future. And thanks for doing it.
No problem. It's definitely something that I always thought about doing, and it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. And you have a unique history here with the Kankakee County Speedway, because you didn't grow up in Kankakee County, but you went on your first date with your wife here.
I did. Yeah. It was 23 years ago, and we were here for fair night and watched the fair race together, and that was our first date.
And then you figured she's open to the first date going to the fair. That might be a keeper.
I guess, yeah. It worked out that way.
But you'd raced here prior to that.
Yeah, so my history with Kankakee, I grew up in a racing family. My dad raced for ever. I was born there. It was basically all through the 70s and 80s, and we came here some growing up, but Santa Fe was most of where we ended up Saturday and Sunday racing there. My dad would run here, Fridays. He would do a little bit of traveling as well. When I was 15 years old, my dad looked at me and said, "Hey, do you want to race?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to race." So Kankakee was it, and I started in 1990 here. I was rookie of the year at this track. I was co-rookie of the year, actually. It was me and another gentleman that raced here a long time, was Brian Staples. And we, ran here a few years through the early 90s and LaSalle Speedway in Santa Fe, and then switched over to asphalt. And I raced asphalt for a long time.
And amongst racers here, there's not many who do that switching over.
No,
there's a small handful, right?
Yeah, no. There's not a ton of people that's bounced back and forth. Ironically, the prior promoter did the same thing. I started on the dirt, and I only went to the pavement because it was close. We lived in Minooka growing up, and so to go from that area to Morris was only 15 minutes away, so it just seemed to be like the smarter thing to do. Go race on Friday nights, closer to home instead of driving an hour to get here. So I did that for 20-something years, and made our way back over here in 2019, and in 2021 won a championship again, and then we started the process of, what was going to happen to Kankakee County Speedway after 2021, and it wasn't looking good.
No, it wasn't.
No, I decided that, I looked into it the end of the 2021 season. I had a meeting with the fair board and met with them and talked to them about it, and talked to the prior promoter about, buying his equipment and the business and stuff like that off of him, and just couldn't come to terms. So I stepped away and was not in the market anymore. And then in the spring was, driving down to Farmer City to go race, which was, a couple hours for me, over 2 hours for me to drive there. And I remember driving there one night, and it was drizzling, and it was, springtime, and I'm going, man, I sure hope we don't rain out after driving 2 hours, So I said, hey, I really wish Kankakee was open, and well, I got a phone call one day and basically said that, that they definitely have decided that they were going to go away from running races at Kankakee. And so, there's some phone calls made, and, we were able to work out some sort of an arrangement with the prior promoter to for the cost of the equipment, and then now here we are sitting today.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of people who are very appreciative of you doing that, and it is kind of a thing where I feel like you really do pour a lot of yourself into what happens here, and just all the details that we were talking earlier about the Kankakee Speedway on the wall and repainting everything, and just all those things that mean a lot to you.
Yeah, I don't think people have any idea. I really don't know what it is with me. I'm 100% at everything I do. So it's not just, you named a few things. It's as simple as, seeing weeds and grabbing a weed whacker, or walking by and seeing garbage in the ground, or, sweeping up dirt, or trying to pressure wash something to make it look better, or wipe something down. And, it's the pits, we have just done tons of work. I can't tell you how many hours that me and Rick Steinke spent, putting grindings throughout the pits, because every time before I took this over, every time you got a little bit of a rain, you're done. You can't drive in the pits.
Well, it wasn't the track in those days. It was because the pits were flooded.
Exactly. So now when it rains, you can still drive through the pits.
Yeah.
If you had a decent amount of rain throughout the week and prior to me, I think like porta johns didn't get cleaned and things like that because you couldn't get to them. Yeah. So that was one of the first things on my agenda, was to make it cleaner, safer, easier to work with, things like that. And we went to work on it last year, and we did a lot. And this past winter, we were out here. We started beginning, I'll never forget, it was the first weekend in February, and we came out here and started changing bleacher boards. We had a mild winter, and I called up some people and I said, hey, what do you think about going out there and change some bleacher boards now instead of waiting until right before race season? So we got on it quick, and then we ended up putting the fence up around the wall over there in turns 1 and 2, and make it safer so people could stand over there and watch the races. And so it's crazy how much goes into this. I could never ever believe how much work this was before I took this over.
Really?
Yeah.
And you're somebody who's raced, you've run a business, you've had a family, you've done things that take work.
Yeah, been racing for 33 years, and I still I had no idea. I'm not going to say that I was one of them believers that, somebody came out here on Friday night and dumped some water on the racetrack and we went racing. I know there's some people out there that do think that, but it's, we race on Friday nights, and a lot of Saturday mornings I get up in the morning, and even my son will come out and help me, and we literally have to, the clay gets so hard from racing on Friday night that we have to water it. So we water the clay, then we drag a disc behind a tractor to disc it up, and then, then we start working on it Monday through Thursday for Friday. And that is the process week in and week out. And we've had a lot of different racetracks this year, and some weeks it gets rough, but it's tough because you just don't know what the weather's going to bring you.
And it changes so much. I think it's interesting the way you said we've had several different racetracks. You look out, it's the same racetrack, but it's so different every week. And I think that's one of the things that makes this style of racing so interesting.
Yeah.
Like you can have some weeks where, and you guys do a really good job, I think, of trying to make the racing as even as you can from the bottom of the track to the top of the track. And that's probably something as a driver you always wanted, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's very unique. When I see a racetrack that's dominant either on the top side of the racetrack or dominant on the bottom, I'm mad at myself that week. I can't sleep. I want to see side-by-side racing because that's what the fans want to see. Mm-hmm. They want to see cars running around this track, 2, even 3 wide sometimes. Yeah. I've even seen 4 wide this year around this little quarter-mile track, and it's interesting to see. I don't want to see crashing. That's not my goal. I know how much money these things cost, and, become doing it myself all these years. It's an expensive sport, so I hate seeing drivers getting crashes. We don't like to see that. I know maybe some of the fans might want to see some crashing, but that's not what we're after. We're after good side-by-side racing.
I think, and there's a difference. I think that's a misconception people have about people who are into racing. You like the carnage of it. Well, actually, we hate it.
Yeah.
I think most of us who are involved, we hate that stuff. We do like a little what I call fender wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of the nature of the dirt track is that, hey, cars are going to slide sideways. Cars are going to scrape up against the wall and the sparks are going to fly. And you're ready for a little leaning on each other, right?
Oh, yeah. It's rubbin's racing, and even as a driver, you don't mind a little rubbing. That is some fun in it. Like this past Friday was probably one of the neatest racetracks that I've seen yet this year. And I did something completely different last week. And that's the crazy thing is I just kind of jump in and I'll take charge and I'll tell the guys, hey, we're going to try this week. And it gives the racers something completely different every week. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you do see the same guys winning races or running up front. They still find a way. But last week the track was very unique and it had a little character to it. Character usually means a little rough spot here or there. And, but it was good, fast racing. Like you said earlier, one of the, if not the closest finish, ever recorded here at the Speedway. I was in the infield when that happened and I clearly could see that he beat him by maybe a foot.
Yeah.
And it was like literally at the last second. We call that a Hail Mary. He just went in there in the last turn and just, Jamie Lomax just put it out there and was going for it and come across the start-finish line and, by a foot.
As a driver, what's that like when you go for the Hail Mary?
Well, I mean, you're giving it everything you got, but I'll tell you, I promise you, his head was turned left going across that start-finish line. He wanted to see if he was ahead or not. I've been in that position. I don't know if it was ever won or lost a race that close, though, but I have lost some close ones and I have won some close ones. And it is pretty cool to be a part of that. The first thing I do now as a promoter is I looked up in the stands. That was our first feature race last week, and I looked up in the stands, and sure enough, there was a lot of people standing.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool. I mean, that's what you're shooting for. You're shooting for, if you got a bunch of people standing, that means you just put on a show. Yeah. And that's what we, if you weren't here last Friday, it wasn't just that division. I mean, the Pro Mods put on an excellent race. The Street Stocks put on an excellent race. The Pro Late Models race was amazing. I mean, that you had a couple guys get flat tires and come from the back of the pack. And Jose Parga, every time that guy's here, man, he's just sparks all the way around the racetrack. And people love it.
I don't think he's finished a race with the spoiler of his car. No. It's ripped off every time.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a lot of people are like, oh man, that guy's so fast. What is he doing different? Well, he puts it all out there, every lap, and I mean, even when he was a half a track ahead at the beginning of the race. I watched him go down the back straightaway, and there's, he made it 3 wide and making weird passes. And I'm going, man, he's so far in front. Why don't he slow down a little, save it a little? No, he don't save nothing. He just keeps going. But that's what makes this cool.
Yeah. Well, and you almost take an approach where, as a driver, when I've seen you race, you're a little more conservative, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. No, I don't like tearing up my equipment. So, I like winning races, but I don't like tearing up my equipment.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work.
It is. It is a lot of work, but I don't do a whole lot of that anymore due to the fact of working on this place.
Yeah. What do you see? Where's racing at a level like Kankakee? Where's it going next?
Well, I wish I knew.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. It's like, not to sugarcoat. It's a struggle.
It is. It's a big struggle. Like I said, I look back at last Friday, and like I said, man, it was. I'm probably a little biased here, but it's some of the best racing I've seen all year, and I've been to multiple racetracks, and it's probably some of the best racing I've seen in a long time, and there's a lot of people missed out on that.
Yeah.
And
well, that was the talent of the drivers you had here.
Yeah.
And their determination, but also, you got to feel some pride in, like, okay, we put together a racetrack that made that happen.
Yeah. No, it and again, when a racetrack is like it was last week, we get a lot of, a lot of racers coming up after the races. A lot of private messages, hey, great job. The track was awesome. Had a lot of fun driving that track. We get a lot of that stuff every week, which is cool. And there's nights where it goes wrong, and they're going to let you know it went wrong, So when you have a good week like that, it makes you feel good about all the work that you did.
Well, and it's, there's no training program. Nobody goes to school and studies how to manicure and prepare a racetrack. You've got to kind of learn from people, and there's some trial and error involved, right?
Well,
everything's place is so different.
There's definitely a lot of trial and error. There is, but I did have a trainer, so I can't say that I didn't. Dave Whittington, Jim Whittington's son here, he. When I took this over, he was exiting, wanted to spend more time in his go-karting, and spend more time on that, try to win a championship. And, so, he took a step back, but he still stayed with us, and, he taught me and, Matt Prodell how to do all this stuff. And, Matt's kind of my right-hand guy. I mean, there's more than just doing this track prep all week. I'm not going to lie. We own the equipment. We own is a bunch of junk. It really is. It's some of it belongs in a scrapyard, but we make it keep going. And I wouldn't be able to do it without a guy like Matt Prodell, because he is somebody that, is really handy. He can step in and pinpoint what a problem is with an old tractor or what is going on with an old water truck or something like that to keep the stuff going. So, I did have somebody to help train me and get me started. And he still comes back. He's come back a couple times this year to help me out when I needed it. Dave Whittington has, and when I started veering off in the wrong direction, he'll step in and give us a hand one night, and which is cool. It's he's one of the few volunteers that we have here. And with this thing, being what it is, and we're not getting a ton of fans here, we need all the volunteers we can get to keep the sport alive. Yeah. And there's people like him that that do appreciate that.
I know that you've gotten some real good support though too from community. And like you built some relationships here, and I think about like the whole deal you did with Express Power Sports this year, where you were able to give away the mini bikes and stuff like that, which is a great kind of local business partnerships and the kind of thing you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we've had such great success with a lot of good local partners, and I have a list that I'd love to go over with at the very end, but. Rick from Express Power Sports, him and I, came together this winter and we were talking, and it's kind of a funny story. He had kind of washed his hands at Kankakee County Speedway a long time ago, and must have had a bad experience or whatever. And I didn't give up. I kept talking to him about it, and we were able to reach a deal for him to come give us a hand, and he put that deal together with the dirt bikes, which was awesome. He gave away 6 dirt bikes to the 6 lucky winners that raced here all season, and we gave away 1 to a lucky fan. And it was really a really neat promotion. We both were kind of a little confused. It just didn't seem like people were wrapping their heads around it until the day we actually gave them away. Even though we talked about it all the time, put it on social media, and just, I talked about it in drivers meetings and things like that. And just, it was really funny the day of, like, all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, you're giving 70s away. Drivers were like asking questions like, where have you been all year?
Yeah.
I'm like, we have talked about this all season.
Well, and maybe it's something that, they're just not used to just getting something really nice for free.
Yeah. No, it was a cool promotion. And, we've had other sponsors do stuff, as well. Meineke of Bourbonnais has come up with some cool things. He gave away free passes to the first so many people through the front gate. We had pit stalls that we sold at the beginning of the year, and he gave away some free pit stalls. And, it just... First Stop Bar and Grill did something cool this year where they basically bought us all the armbands, and you get a free drink or a discount on a drink or something like that on over at the bar after the races. Is another way to try to draw people to go there. Just always people thinking outside the box, and I've got a lot of other neat ideas. Big Daddy Scrap, they have a big event here every year where they have a party, and they brought 250 people roughly to come watch races on a Friday night, which was really cool. So but yes, we do get a lot of community support. I do think that that's something that this place was lacking in the past, and it was something that I'm not going to lie, I didn't invent the wheel there. I've seen it firsthand at Fairbury. They do a great job over there at getting the whole local community involved, and it was something that I know that's got to happen for the future of the sport in Kankakee, is to try to get the community involved, because then if they're involved, then more people will want to come be a part of it. Yeah.
Well, I know you've done things now like with the Crown Vics. And for people who don't know what this is, these are old police cars.
Yeah.
And that you put roll cages in, and people get out there and they have a blast. So people can rent them. People have their own, and it's a whole division of racing now that in a world where everything got more expensive and more expensive and more expensive, you kind of, okay, let's create something that people can just go and do.
Well, one of the worst things that's happened in racing is the cost has went up like everything else. Every hobby is expensive. If you're a golfer, or you're a race car driver, if you're, whatever you're into, the cost is
everything besides Frisbee.
Okay. I can't say I've ever tried Frisbee, but I get it,
Yeah. But it's everybody wants to go faster.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, one of the things that the sport is lacking is an entry level division. So, we have 4 cylinders, and when I got to the racetrack, the 4-cylinder division was kind of dragging, and it was, we were struggling with cars, and I went around and I talked to drivers, and I asked a lot of questions, and because I didn't know a lot about it, and I found out that people are spending between $10,000 and $20,000 on a 4-cylinder car.
Which is ridiculous.
So I said, well, man, that's tough. So I created a division last year called Stock, which was a stock 4-cylinder class. And it hasn't grown. The most I've ever seen show up is about 8 cars in that division. And we're trying hard to still continue to grow that. I'd love to see the stock 4-cylinder cars, because they're a dime a dozen at the junkyards. And honestly, if somebody were to go throw their own roll cage in a car, maybe they go over to the local salvage yard and, over to Big Daddy Scrap or one of the other local salvage yards and go get a free car, throw a roll cage in the thing, and, put some, a racing seat and seat belts in it. And you probably could build yourself a race car for less than $3,000. And the Crown Vic thing was something that I started this year, and I personally bought 15 police cars. And I brought them back, and, we've been putting cages in them, and I've been renting them all season long to different guys. And I can be honest with you, there's been a lot of carnage, and I've had to repair a lot of them, and it's not any money maker whatsoever. But my goal is still to this day is to grow the division, because I feel like you need to get new people in the sport. Mm-hmm. You got to get new racers out there, and it is working. I mean, we're starting to see more and more interest in it. I think we've had as many as 12 cars is the most we've had this season. I know of about 5 other people that are building cars right now. Don't know if they'll make it out this year or they're going to be ready for next year, but they're really excited for it. They're watching it every week, and they actually put on some good racing. They're not fast. I mean, they kind of go around there, a lot slower speed, but there's a lot of side-by-side racing and a little bit of banging and fender wrestling, as you called it. Yeah. And but it's exciting, and it's exciting because you're getting people in those cars that might not be able to ever afford to race anything else we have here. Mm-hmm. And that's been my goal all along is if you can get a new racer in a car, then their friends, their family, sponsors, whatever, they're going to start coming to the races. And that's what we got to do to grow racing is from the ground up.
Well, and you mentioned how those cars are slower, but they do put on some great races.
Yes, they do.
I think one of the things you do a good job of here, and I know as an announcer here, we have somebody win a Crown Vic race. That Crown Vic winner is just as excited.
Oh, yeah.
As somebody who won in a pro late model or modified that, is many, many times more expensive a car. The thrill of it is consistent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I think, whoever makes it across that victory lane, and gets to park in front of that and they get that big check in front of them, they're just as excited. And I've had so many people in them lower divisions come up to me and they're like, man, Billy, thank you for all you do. This was awesome. This was, the highlight of my life. I've heard that, the highlight of my life.
Wow.
And it's one of them things that, as a racer, the pride, when you do win, like you hold your head up high, and there's racers that never get that, so it's been my goal to try to get more people to be able to have that. This year we did the thing called the New Winners Race. All-Star Performance sponsored that, and basically, if you've never won a race before in each division, we've given them all at least 3 chances to run a race out there against just other drivers that never won a race. And we had a lot of new winners this year, which was pretty neat.
And some great moments with those winners and families.
And some of them, it's funny because before the season we were talking about, in each division, who's going to get their first win. And so like if they win that race, then they get to start on the pole that night of the feature, which is cool. And then a lot of times it's worked out great. And some nights it's not, some nights, you get a guy starts on a pole and he's 2/10 slower and he backs up in a hurry and, cause a crash or get into a crash. But for the most part, it's been pretty good. We haven't seen a whole lot of that, but, to me, I thought it was really neat and I think it's worked out well. And like I said, every time that guy comes across and he wins that race, they're so excited. I mean, Mira Tilstra, just this last time, smiles from ear to ear, I mean, she had actually just won a race at Fairbury the week prior. So she got two weeks in a row. She got some kind of win and, she got that, that experience of winning a race.
Well, I think people focus on the winning part. I've seen these moments where people in the pits talking to each other, pulling off the track together. Racers who race side by side, lap after lap, have some good competition out there. Like that's a pretty cool thing too, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Just racing.
Yeah. No, I mean, you get these guys that'll be racing for 5th place, and they're side by side the whole race, and they're smiling and joking afterwards, and they're like, "Oh, that was so cool," and man, one lap you got me, the next lap I got you, and they're kidding around with each other. Man, I wasn't gonna let you win. There's no way, I wasn't gonna let you beat me, type of stuff. But yeah, no, it's pretty neat racing.
Well, and you over your career, you probably had guys who, and you see them next to you, and oh, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah. I don't know.
You're more focused on, okay, I'm beating them. I'm not thinking about them. I'm in front of them.
When I strap into a race car, my dad taught me at a young age, you got to put blinders on.
Mm-hmm.
Not blinders to what's surrounding you, but to who's surrounding you.
Okay.
You don't know names, you don't know numbers, you just drive. And when I race to win. And I don't really think about who it is I'm around.
Really?
I just race to win. And it's not something that every driver out here has. I mean, I see intimidation. When I hear somebody go, "Oh, I don't have a chance," I'm like, "Well, you lost already."
Mm-hmm.
So you can't go out there with that mentality that you can't beat who's around you, or the guy that's around you is going to crash you, or you kind of got to just go out there and race to race.
Mm-hmm.
If you go out there and you start somewhere and say you're second row and the guys in front of you, they're all over the place, you just figure out a way to get around them.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't pay attention to that.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's talk about some of the people who've supported you over this.
So yeah, I got a little list here.
Yeah.
So I'll go through it pretty fast.
Well, yeah, we can.
So we've had a lot of support this year. I got Taylor Dodge, Taylor Ford, Meineke.
Awesome pace trucks.
Yeah, they supply race truck, pace trucks, and Meineke of Bourbonnais, Romar Transportation, Big Rig Oil Pros, Express Power Sports, Big Daddy Scrap, CR Towing, Belson Scrap, Dyer's Rods, Miller Hydraulic, Wilkins Auto Rebuilders, Three Sons Auto Salvage, First Place Oils, Cyclone Graphics, First Stop Bar and Grill, Stevenson's Custom Carts, Stevenson's Auto Repair, JR's Chicken, Affordable Lawn Care, Grossbusters, Exterior Cleaning, Phantom Harley, Electric Solutions, Mid-Am Racing Series, JTL Tools, All Time Snow Removal, Chuck Uris, Ronco Storage, Containers, Illinois Hall of Fame, Club Construction, Briggs Tree Service, Chicago Dough Pizza, Slim's Poorhouse, All-Star Performance, Richard's Building Supply, Bill Speed Shop, DLS Enterprises, High Performance Lubricants, Grief Packaging, Dave's Tree Service, All Automotive, Fun Hub, General Oil, Sherwin-Williams, Fasten All by Jessica, Big Daddy's Custom Fabrication, BDK Tools, Bush Light, Michelob Ultra, and Gross & Ver Trucking. Also, the people that have helped me this year, all the volunteers and people that's went above and beyond, Rick and Lucinda Steinke, Scott Glassford, Chris Casey, Matt and Barb Pradell, Billy Yonka, Dave Whittington, Jim Whittington, John Koff, BK3, my son,
Yep.
my wife Brenda, and my dad.
Yeah. I think, when you talk about families doing this together, Jim and his son kind of always been out here together. Me and my dad were always out here together. You and your dad, and now your son always out here together. People don't get racing stuff. I try to explain it to them how much fun it is. And I have to say, did you watch Field of Dreams? Did you see what, the connection he had with his dad? And he wanted to, it was all about kind of this family connection, that the baseball is what kept them talking through different times in their lives. When maybe they were heading in different directions, they still had baseball. Yeah. Well, for a lot of us, racing has been like that.
Oh, this is truly a family sport.
Yeah.
It's truly a family tradition, family sport. racing's been in my blood from long before I was born.
Yeah.
And my dad's dad was involved with racing. He wasn't a driver, but he was involved. Obviously my dad raced for a lot of years. I've raced for a lot of years. Now my son races. My brothers raced. Between the three of us, my dad, my brother, and myself, I don't even know what it is, but there's several championships, several race wins. But it's not just the Knippenbergs that are that way.
Yeah.
The name Izzo came up earlier, the Izzos were all a part of that, and the O'Connors and the Heckenasts, and the list goes on. It's just names that been through this thing, and over the years, and that's what's kept it alive. Is the family tradition, the family sport. But I do think that's dwindling. And I think it's time that we try to create new family traditions.
Yeah, who are going to be the people coming up now that are going to have their kids and grandkids be part of it. Keep it going.
It's one of the cool things I do get to see on a weekly basis. My son comes here. If he's not driving, he's helping. He's running around here, and I've been watching. He's got a handful of friends that's migrated. He was a graduate of Plainfield High School, and he's got friends coming from Plainfield all the way out to here to watch racing every Friday night, and they're hooked. One of his friends comes up to me every week and says, "Mr. Knippenberg," and I always look at him and say, "Please quit calling me Mr." But he's like, "Man, this is awesome. I love this. This is so cool, and I'm going to drive a race car someday." That's what we need. We need more of that. We need to bring the younger ones here and get them hooked at a younger age, and it's my goal is to keep some type of division affordable here, and that's something that's been forgotten at a lot of racetracks. A lot of racetracks only care about late models and modifieds, and that's it. Maybe street stocks. They don't care about 4-cylinders and Crown Vics, and I'd like to try maybe even, I've been talking about it, building a pickup truck class, half-ton pickup trucks, but it's one of them things that I think racing's lacking is the beginning, the new beginning.
Yeah. And racing's different than any other sport in that way, because a lot of it is, this equipment that you're in really dictates a lot of the opportunities you get in the sport.
Right. But it's different and it's not different. It's different because anybody can come do this. Not anybody can go run at this type of level if they're playing ball.
No, you're right.
They can go play some leagues, some softball leagues or whatnot, but they can't go jump in some minor league, baseball team without playing ball their whole life.
No,
whether it's
they don't
football
have beginner
or
nights,
baseball or soccer or whatever the case may be. This is something that anybody can do, and that's what needs to be talked about the most. Is like, hey, if you like this, you can do this, and there's a way.
Yeah. And there's some good people out there too who, if someone was brand new to it and young, they could help out a race team. There's people all the time who kind of just jump in and learn and figure it out, and eventually.
I would have to tell you that there's 100 race cars in those pits every Friday night, and I would have to say that probably 80 of them would accept anybody that's willing to come and help, if not more. Because it is definitely a love. It's a passion.
Well, Billy, thanks so much for taking the time to talk about this, and it's a real honor being able to host the podcast this week, and hopefully get to do it again. And I can't think of anything better to talk about than I could do this all night, but we gotta, wrap it up eventually. But really, really cool, and we definitely appreciate everything you've done to keep it going.
I'd like to thank you and Kankakee Podcast for having this, and it's pretty neat to be a part of it. And again, it just brings us a little bit closer to the local community, and people got to understand, we're not too far away from town here. We're only 5 miles from town here. So
awesome. Thank you, Billy.
Now, the 2023 racing season is officially over by the time this episode is published, but that doesn't mean you can't keep your eyes peeled for what's happening in 2024. So you can stay up to date on everything at KankakeeCountySpeedway.com. Well, that concludes this episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake Lamore. Thank you so much for listening. Special thank you to our guest host, Bill Yonka. That was quite a special treat. And also to both of our guests, Jim Whittington and Billy Knippenberg. Also want to give a shout out to two of our Pathfinder production team members, which is Matt Olszewski and also Andrew McBurney for helping record and produce this episode. And a special shout out to our patrons as well. Don Geisinger, Diana Crowley, Joseph Lamont, Bill Parakis of Meineke Car Care Center, Lori Crayoch, SLS Home Inspections, Seth and Mary Berkey, Jesse Arsenal, Dave Barron, Veronica Featherston, John Sullivan, Lake Iverson, Jane Bostwick, Simon Topless, Carrie O'Connell, Jamie Race, Joanne Barry, Anthony Vicelli, Natalie Flagel, Carl Earps, Jeff and Rosa Carroll, Teague Dreenan, Sandy and Steve Twait, and Rose Lucky. Our theme song was written and performed by Lupe Carroll.